interpretation of coronary angiogram. The next session will be
Okay, thank you.
session on cardiac arrhythmias. This will be done by Dr. C. Narasimhan. Dr. Narasimhan, are you there? Dr. Narasimhan? Dr. Narasimhan?
Hello.
Hello, Narasimhan.
Yes, sir. Am I audible? They have unmuted me. Yeah.
Okay, fine. During your session, there are about 4 or 5 volunteers.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can just call by name.
Yes.
My name, Dr. Rajesh.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Lokre.
Yes, sir.
And Dr. Lakshman. And you can call, there are 2 more. I don't have the names with me.
Yes, sir. They can put it in the chat box if there is anything.
Volunteer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sure.
You can go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir, for this. Looking forward to a wonderful meeting. It's more a learning experience. I think all of you agree that we are in this business of cardiology to take care of our patients, what is right and what is the right thing to be done. So we'll show you examples where we are inundated by guidelines, which there are about 1,000 guidelines per year. To the extent that BMJ has published how to write a guideline, there is a publication. So let us just start why we are relegated the clinical evaluation to the backside and how that is relevant. This is a 62-year-old diabetic hypertensive admitted with septic shock in the surgical ICU following a pyelonephritis. He had a E. coli that was grown sensitive to levofloxacin, on insulin, NORAD for the pressures, slowly weaned off. And this is his electrocardiogram. So you can see the standard limb leads here and chest leads. And what do you think is the alternatives are here? You think the ECG is abnormal in the sense it has got an LVH, a long QT, LAFB, or it's an atrial tachycardia? Any Lakshman? Dr. Lakshman?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
The ECG consists of narrow complex rhythm, sinus rhythm, sir.
Yes.
With normal PV and QRS morphology.
Yeah.
It's more likely of a left anterior fascicular block. Yes.
So what do you think you would do? You saw the thing here, QT? Are you able to see my point?
Yes, sir. QT is 440. Yes, sir. QT is 570 milliseconds, sir.
Which is abnormal.
The person who is on quinolones.
Yes, sir.
What would you do? So, what is relevant to this patient? On the one hand, he has got a serious sepsis, which was responding to levofloxacin. Okay. On the other hand, the physician has rightly picked up a QTC that is prolonged, and he wants to stop levofloxacin. The only other drug is Gentav, to which it's sensitive to. What would you do?
Because the QTC is prolonged, we will stop the medication, sir, and we'll think of some other alternatives.
Okay. Very good. These are called laying traps for you, and that's exactly referring to it. This is a common problem in QT interpretation. When the PR becomes prolonged, the machine interprets the P gets hidden within the, after you can do some interventions on this patient. For example, you do a carotid massage and you can bring out the P wave out of the T wave. So the machine doesn't know what is a P. It is called as an offline testing analysis. When the offline goes off, it draws a tangent. It includes both and then calls it as a QT. So why is this relevant? Because you are having a life-threatening illness for which the patient is sensitive to, and you don't want to stop a drug, which is, the patient is responding very well. So these things are not theoretical. They have practical bearing. So common misconceptions regarding QT where errors happen, the machine misreads the QT whenever there is an atrial arrhythmia. frequent PACs or patients with prolonged QRS. So you need to be aware, and there are correction algorithms. This is beyond. This is just to highlight the cognitive errors that we are prone to in clinical practice. So the actual QTC is only 446. We asked them to continue. Everything was all and well. Next is Dr. Rajesh. This is a 12-lead ECG, lead 1, 2, 3, standard limb leads. Is it atrial tachycardia, AVRT, or AVNRT? 14-year-old boy with palpitations.
Sir, this is relatively narrow complex tachycardia, sir, slightly varying in rate and with regular rate, varying rate. But we could see some delta waves, sir, in 1 and 2. So probably AVRT.
No, please understand, AVRT, the QRS cannot be wide. The QRS is by antigrade activation of the His-Purkinje system in AVRT, and retrograde, it uses the accessory pathway. A delta wave that was present in sinus will disappear during tachycardia. But you picked up the right diagnosis for a wrong reason anyway. This is what it is. It has a QRS alternance. Alternate QRS, the amplitude increases and decreases. There is a cycle length alternance. There is lateral STT changes, which often misleads the clinician to go and do an angiogram and thinking it's coronary. Cycle length alternance happens because there is an alternative conduction between fast and slow pathway. Everything fits in for an orthodromic AVRT. When you see cycle length alternance, QRS alternance, and STT changes, there is no other differential diagnosis. This is all junk because this is what you get in casualty. Baseline wanders because of the chest movement and so on and so forth. Now, this is a 23-year-old girl with palpitation, was referred for a EP-RFA from a neighboring state. What do you think is the pathway? Is it an epicardial accessory pathway? So we need to be prepared for an epicardial ablation, anteroseptal accessory pathway for EP-RF, or you would not do anything and plan on an MRI and plan on a device therapy, or start on beta blockers. Dr. Lohtra?
Sir, it looks, good morning, sir. It looks more like HCM, sir, because there are dagger-shaped T-wave inversions. So we'll first do an MRA and look for late gadolinium enhancement.
Yes.
And stratify the risk and then go for ICD.
What do you want to do regarding the pathway? Patient's main problem is palpitation.
Okay. So this is right-sided pathway, sir. Right lateral wall. And
what will you do?
we can do
So
an
there are a couple
ablation.
of things. Any idea about what is that? Yes, yes. Again, we set the trap and you fall again. So whenever look at this, this is a AV ring, atrium here, ventricle here. Now you look at this, look at the ECG, P wave, delta wave, no P wave, but still there is a delta wave. You see this? See, this complex has a P delta, no P, this is a junctional escape. And it has a delta wave. Junctional escape has a delta. Junctional escape has a delta. Why is this relevant? Please understand, it is atrioventricular connection. You need a sinus P or an atrial rhythm for the pathway to conduct. Whereas here the junction is firing and you still have a pre-excitation. It is not an AV pathway. This is called fasciculoventricular pathway, which is very benign, does not need any intervention. This patient was referred for an ablation. So this is like missing the forest for a tree. You miss the whole clinical picture. Luckily, you picked it up. This is a classic picture where you get a marked LVH with pre-excitation, is commonly seen in conditions like Fabry's, Danon's disease, or patients with AMK mutations. So your answer was right. You should forget about the ablation. This patient needs risk stratification for the HCM. And there are certain syndromes which are associated with pre-excitation and HCM, what I mentioned, but your answer is absolutely correct. So when you see a fasciculoventricular conduction, it will happen irrespective of the sinus conduction. You don't need a atrial activation. Am I clear? Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So normally AV conduction here, when from the free wall here directly it connects to the bundle, it's called as atriofascicular pathway. That is Maheim fiber pathway. These things can reciprocate and cause a tachycardia. But this fasciculoventricular is a benign entity, and that is due to loss of insulation of your bundle branches, where instead of the impulse breaking down below, the impulse breaks down here itself, causing that shortening. Fasciculoventricular pathways do not lead to re-entry or tachycardias. Now, this is a patient who presented with presyncope. You can see I hope the ECG projects well. You can answer in the chat box if you want to. Lead 1, 2, 3. Of course, V1 to V6. What do you think is the diagnosis? Had some vague palpitations and other things. Do you want to investigate? Echo was normal. See, the problem is a clinician should know when to use the investigation. We don't keep on doing every right bundle is a benign right bundle. You don't need to investigate. What is this? Is it incomplete right bundle due to degenerative disease? Is it Brugada? Is it ARVC? Is it sarcoid? We'll have Dr. Dayasagar told me 3 names, but let's go to the 4th volunteer now.
So ARVC,
Dr.
sir.
Lokre, sir.
Lokre, go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. 12 lead ECG, PR intro is almost full, sir. Sinus rhythm.
PR is here, no? 180. 180 is not, it's measured as 180. It looks normal.
Yes, sir. There is RSR pattern in V1 and slightly wider QRS complex. And very small Rs and deeper S waves in the left precordial leads.
Exactly. Which is all consistent
Not
with.
exactly RBPB.
That's what you see in a right bundle branch block, isn't it?
Usually, sir, but the S wave in V5, V6 should be wider if it was just a right bundle branch block.
So what is it? Again, you picked up the correct, what is the diagnosis? Brugada or?
Possibly
This is a
ARVC, but you
common
said
thing.
echo is normal.
Yes.
Not able to.
ARVC, sir, because R prime is smaller than R.
Exactly. So when you take a right bundle branch block, all of you go back to physiology. The initial vector is from left to right. That is the septal activation, which is responsible for a small R. Then unopposed activation of the left ventricle responsible for the S because the vector is going away. Then once it is completed its activation, there is an unopposed basal right ventricular activation, which is responsible for the R prime. So classic right bundle branch block, the R prime would be taller than the R. If you say the R prime is very dwarfed, then you should suspect that this is not a typical right bundle branch block. The second clue is you look at the V6 and V1. You measure the end of the QRS, you can bring it up. This has become very narrow, whereas the duration is long in V1, suggesting the activation time of the anterior ventricle is very delayed. So everything is a telltale sign of an right ventricular disease. And this patient with an MRI was turned out to be a ARVC. So these things are common clinical situations, but I want you to pay attention to, because if you say everything is all right, you miss an opportunity to treat. At the same time, every right bundle, you don't want to go on ordering an MRI.
Sir, is that
Sir, is that
epsilon wave,
wave,
sir?
Yes, that is a epsilon wave. You're right. Okay. 45-year-old male palpitation syncope normal echo. Same alternatives, incomplete right bundle, first degree AV block, old inferior wall MI, Brugada syndrome, ARVC, sarcoid. So unlike Dr. Goyal, minds are very, very down to earth, what we are seeing day in and day out, but it can make a tremendous difference in your day-to-day practice. Anyone? Just, we can't even look at you. You can shout whatever you want.
Yes, sir.
You can say this is a stupid ECG. Go ahead.
So sarcoidosis, sir.
Why sarcoid?
So,
Because I am projecting it.
Sir, there is his first option, sir. Old inferior wall MI with first degree block and incomplete RBI.
Okay, very good.
Because there are Q waves are there in 3 AVF and first degree AV block is there.
Very good. So this is the genuine concern. For example, immediately if you think this patient is sine qua non in patients with inferior wall infarct is a right-sided vector. You should have some degree of Q here also. Second is, if you look at V1, V2 it's 4 millimeter R wave. V3 suddenly R wave is lost. Secondly, there is, are you able to see my pointer?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is a fractionation of the QRS. If the initial portion of the QRS is fractionated, terminally it's fractionated. So this is one of our fellows presented it. When you have what looks like a normal patient who comes for run-of-the-mill PVC evaluation, are there any pointers to suspect sarcoid? And this is what he looked at in about 42 patients. And if you have fascicular block or bundle branch block, sarcoid is more likely. If you have fractionated QRS, sarcoid is more likely. And if you have a low QRS amplitude, that indicates myocardial edema, because bipolar leads, it has to look at the potential difference between anode and cathode. If there is water logging there, it will short circuit and the voltage will become smaller. So if there is a QRS amplitude is very low, it is again suggestive of a granulomatous disease. So this is a useful paradigm. This is not required in a patient with structurally abnormal heart. But the common clinical situation for in practice is a patient who comes with completely normal echo. These are the subtle clues which makes you suspect that this patient may have a granulomatous myocarditis and you need to investigate further. This is a classic example from the same publication showing you what FQRS is and so on and so forth. You can look it up. So the so-called right bundle has several variants. What is this? This is a 17-year-old boy who presented from St. Teresa's Hospital to us.
Looks like a Brugada syndrome, sir. Brugada pattern type 2.
Pectus excavatum is one of the variants. Pectus excavatum can cause Brugada variant. It's exactly mimics. But how do you differentiate? Several incomplete right bundle branch block will look like this. So that is when, if you look at incomplete, are you able to see the pointer? Are you able to see my pointer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the base of the triangle will be very narrow. So it will be a very narrow, sharp R prime, whereas in Brugada, you will find that this will be very broad and slurred. So this base of the triangle, it's called Chevalier angle, but it's not necessary to know the name. When you eyeball, when you see this is like a spike and comes back immediately, it's more likely to be a right bundle. When it is like a slow offset, it's more likely to be a Brugada syndrome. There are several publications which have tested the validity of this. So this boy was admitted, 17-year-old boy was admitted with recurrent seizures, and he was loaded with the levetiracetam and all the anticonvulsants. and multiple shocks. And then what do you think you should treat him with? IV amiodarone, isoproterenol, lidocaine, or sotalol?
Isoprelin.
Go ahead.
Isoprelin,
Why?
sir.
You want to make
Drug
that
of
your first?
Drug of choice for Brugada syndrome. Brugada with VTV.
Is this the same patient
Very
as the
right.
previous ones?
So this patient had multiple episodes. So what happens? Epicardium is unable to hold the voltage because it loses sodium. Outward current is high. This outward current gets aggravated by fever, channel blockade. Classic example, tricyclic antidepressants. The anticonvulsants this patient has received, all the antiarrhythmics we use in practice will worsen the situation and will increase this gradient between endo and epi and will worsen Brugada. So lidocaine, all the beta blockers, everything will worsen the situation, and the drug of choice, as you said rightly, is isoproterenol. So this is one situation where we don't remember, we should not be using sodium channel blockers, alpha agonists, Benadryl, for example, which is commonly used, tricyclic antidepressants. All these things can aggravate the problem. So please avoid this. The simplest thing is 90% of a Brugada. Yes, quinidine will. So it's a classic sodium channel blockade. You should not.
Quinidine also needs the treatment, sir.
Quinidine can be used because it specifically has an action on ITO current.
Okay.
ITO, transient outward current, that is the only drug which acts on that. Okay.
But it was a class
It is used as a treatment. Yes, the exception is because it acts on ITO current, and second thing is it blocks the vagal activity. So vagotonia is abolished. ITO current is again restored to normal. That is how it works. That is an exception, whereas procainamide worsens the situation. So when you have a person with early repol or conventional antiarrhythmics, start isoproterenol, general anesthesia, hypothermia, just start instilling cold saline in the through a Ryle's tube, IV gold saline, and recurrent shocks. This patient required almost about Vikram and Daljit, my colleagues, treated this with almost more than 100 shocks over a day. And finally, since nothing was working, we had to map the epicardium, and where the producing abnormal voltages, we ablated, and this patient is doing well now, about 2 years. So this is a patient who wants to be in the police academy training, two of the patients, panel A and panel B. Which of these is a more malignant, or conversely, which is a benign ectopy, which is a malignant ectopy? This is a common thing. They come from police academy or from pilot training.
Sir, A is benign, sir.
Why?
Oh, that VPC is falling after some time, sir. After T wave.
Why? Yes.
There is a notch in the descending limb of R wave in case of D, sir, which is a malignant feature. It's of ventricular origin.
Both are ventricular origin.
Ventricular, but it is some like a prickled origin also.
Two things. One is when you have the coupling interval. Look at the coupling interval. Whenever you have a very short coupling interval, the peak of the T wave is when this QRS happens. So, which means the refractory period is extremely short, and this patient has a QR, and things indicate that there is a high tendency for VF. So, when you have what looks like a benign PVC, you need to look at the density of the PVC. If your Holter shows more than 25-30% of the day the patient has PVC, the atypical morphology is like what we saw. You said about notch, epicardial pattern, like if it's completely negative in lead 1, epicardial voltages, complex PVC, that is multiform, which increases with exercise. That is abnormal. And if there's a family history of sudden cardiac event or cardiomyopathy, you should not, this station. So you should be aware of looking at all these things. Varying coupling interval, short coupled PVCs, PVCs of multiple morphology, and complex PVCs, you should not dismiss them as benign PVCs. We'll be again on the thing with the PVC. This is a 72-year-old person with hypertension, syncope, and sweating.
Sir, if you excuse me, previous ECG,
Yeah, please.
previous ECG, what is the malignant, sir? B, sir? B only, no, sir.
We don't know. Broadly, what I am saying is that patient would require, most likely he will have a septal scar from whatever reason. So this is only to illustrate that this is a high sample coupling interval. When it varies, it tells you, I'm not going to the specifics. When coupling interval keeps varying, it is more common in lamin mutations. Whereas when it is more likely to have a septal Q and short thing, there is a septal scar. MRI will show a mid-septal scar, and these are likely to progress. So 72-year-old person, hypertension, pre-syncope with sweating. What would you do? Is it, why did he have this episode? Was it transient AFib, transient VT? Was it vasovagal? Was it transient AV block? What you see is a strip in lead V1, which was picked up from the monitor. Go ahead.
Is it VT, sir? Can we say it's a bidirectional?
I wish you people spend more time evaluating patients like this in your clinic because someone is thinking. Go ahead. Because the frequent PACs, you think it's paroxysmal AFib
Transient AV block, sir?
responsible, or you think it's VT, or there's a blocked P wave, is it AV block? Long
Transient
time.
AV block.
I'm picking on you. Transient AV block. Okay.
The last but one AV P wave was not conducted. Sir.
See, you mark the P wave, P to P, P to P. Hello. Can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Yeah, I think they have muted me from the host side. It says host has muted. Watch out. So, P.
So your slide is not seen, sir. I'm sorry.
What is happening, guys? It was
You have to share the screen one more.
again, nah?
Screen share,
So,
sir.
something
Slides are not seen.
It was going on fine. They unmuted me, or is it seen?
No, sir. Not it. Not it.
No, sir.
Dr. Narasimhan,
Yes, sir.
can you hear? I'm Dr. Abraham here listening to you.
Oh, yes, sir. How are you?
In Chennai, going on. Going on. So I keep in
has
touch with
changed
Dea Sir Rao.
the way we practice medicine. It's really wonderful. Instead of meeting in person, we are meeting this. Okay, I'm sharing the screen. Is it obvious now?
It'll come now, I think.
Yes, come.
No, it is not yet. It will start.
How about now?
No, it is in the
Speaking
process.
from home or
It's in
from office?
It's loading.
Okay.
It is loading. It is start. So the Narasimhan, sharing.
So you have to double click to enter the full screen mode, something like that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it has come.
Hello.
Yes, sir. It's seen now, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry for the interruption. So you can see PP marching through. This is a concealed conduction. Because of the PVC, it is going back retrogradely and blocking. This is physiological. In you and me, this will happen. So this doesn't mean there is anything. So let us start with this. PR, normal QRS. Now, because there is a long pause, there is a phenomenon called Ashman. Long, short cycle will produce a right bundle branch block. Mauricio Rosenbaum described this called as a Rosenbaum sign. When a right bundle branch block happens, it will unmask an old anteroseptal myocardial infarction, which was not seen initially. Because now there is a block in the moderator band, the initial left to right conduction is there, but it doesn't go to the free wall. You will get a QR. So this tells you that this patient has had an old anteroseptal myocardial infarction, which is QR. Then PVC is coming from the same site, from the septum. So putting everything together, most likely this patient had a VT. I mean, it's impossible to be 100% sure, but instead of just passing it off as definitely you wouldn't like to just put a pacemaker for this patient because the patient may still die of a VTVF. So this was described by an Argentinian cardiologist called Rosenbaum. It's called Rosenbaum sign, where a bundle branch block unmasks the old MI. What is this? 54-year-old male with DCM, mild palpitation, no history of risk factors, on adequate beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, normal effort tolerance, vitals are normal. This was picked up on a monitor when he was had palpitation. He was sent on ELR. Now we get to see this quite often. These are called spike signs. You march back here, this spike to this spike, it marches inside. You can see high voltage spikes. When the spike falls on this artifact, it will produce a notch. So when you have an occasional sinus beat and another lead, spike sign which marches through, or a notch on the broad QRS, you should think of an artifact. These are all giveaways for you to make a diagnosis of artifact. So don't be, this patient doesn't need anything. He needs evaluation for his DCM. Common reason why this happens is if your recording electrode is on a muscle, when there is muscle artifacts, for example, when the patient is brushing his teeth or holding something to open, it shouldn't produce an artifact if the leads are on a bony point. So these things are not often tested, and we just put it on a muscle and you tend to pick up a lot of muscle artifacts. So this is just an artifact in a patient. Similar example, you can see the spike very well marching through. You take a caliper, this to this, this to this, this to this, this to this, again marching here. So you conversely here, from here to here, it's marching. So this is, you're not alone. There is a very nice publication in NEJM where Western countries have gone on to the extent of putting ICD based on a wrong diagnosis of VT, which was never present in the beginning. So it's an NEJM publication by Bradley Knight. You can look at it. Never miss this opportunity. This is a 27-year-old person with recent onset dyspnea, EF of 40%. And he had a little dizziness, and this was the ECG. Any takers? Hello? Hello?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, this is a VT, sir.
Polymorphic VT.
Yes. So
polymorphic.
I'm glad in the interest of time, I'm trying to go away. This is the panel C is polymorphic VT, where there is a continuous evaluation, there is a continuous change in the QRS morphology from beat to beat to beat. This is polymorphic VT. Whereas if it's very similar in a post-infarction, that is sustained monomorphic VT on top panel A. You see panel B, one particular morphology, which changes to another morphology here. So there are two or three distinct morphologies. This one and that one. This one predominantly conforms to one. Occasionally 2 or 3 morphologies are coming. This is called pleomorphic VT. We find this a very diagnostic sign of an underlying granulomatous myocarditis, any myocarditis, for example. This can also happen when there's a lot of myocardial edema. It can be edema can happen in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, myocardial injury, or as an infarction process. But in the absence of these situations, when you see it, it should make you suspect that the patient is having the two classic features are irregular cycle length and varying morphology. This should make you suspect that this is a granulomatous myocarditis, either tuberculosis or sarcoid, as the case may be. This is a 54-year-old person with chest pain for 3 days, was loaded with antiplatelets, low molecular weight heparin, and then undergoes a PTCA of LAD, and then presents with recurrence of chest pain 3 days later. Brief episode of dizziness and vomiting. What will you do?
This could be pericarditis or pericarditis, sir, because in the AVR there is PR segment elevation is there and diffuse segment ST.
So this is called a step sign, PR segment elevation, and it's down below. Here there is a PR segment depression in other leads, very classic, and this is called a step sign, which is indicative of pericarditis. Why in these days this is very relevant, because you and me know during thrombolytic trials beyond 5-6 hours the myocardium is dead. This is a classic example when you reperfuse a myocardium, which is in the brain, it is more common. It's called a pale infarct becoming a red infarct. A similar thing, this is from a Japanese author. Patient didn't make it because they opened the vessel 6 hours after the onset of pain, and you can see both a contraction band necrosis and coagulation necrosis, which is typical of an hemorrhagic infarct in a large area. So these things, especially when you give 2-3 antiplatelets and we load them up with everything and then reperfuse in a dead myocardium, this can always happen, especially in elderly women. You need to be extra careful. This is one of the reasons why early post-infarction deaths are often due to myocardial ruptures, which can happen. The coagulative necrosis extends over 4 or 5 days. And when the patient is discharged at home, it's not VT, it's the myocardial slippage, which results in sudden death. So that's what happened. Diagnosis in this case, patient with syncope. Slow VT, needs a PPI, needs an angio. So this is a classic sign of a bilateral bundle branch block. So what happens in this complex? Can you see my pointer? Pointer is seen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you see a QRBB, a right bundle branch block. When the right bundle is blocked, the impulse comes down to the ventricle through the left bundle and depolarizes. Now here, suddenly the left bundle is getting blocked. So alternatively, there is a right bundle and a left bundle which is getting blocked, which indicates this is a bilateral bundle branch block and the patient is at a high risk of Stokes-Adam. He needs a pacemaker right away. This is a patient, 78-year-old person with dual chamber pacemaker, presents with recurrent dizziness, palpitation, and sudden onset of breathlessness. He says, I was all right before the pacemaker. Like so many of our patients, they are well off if they're left alone. So he started becoming symptomatic. He was given a pacemaker for a sick sinus syndrome, not a AV block. And then this is what happens. Diagnosis.
Pacemaker mediated tachycardia, sir.
Pacemaker mediated tachycardia.
Atrial
There seems to be VA
tachycardia,
conduction.
pacemaker mediated tachycardia. So the alternatives are atrial undersensing, atrial tachycardia, runaway pacemaker, loss of atrial pacing. You see the complex number 1, 2, 3, 4. In the fourth complex, you see a atrial spike, no capture. So what happens is that because the atrium was not depolarized, the impulse never reached the AV node. But by that time, you pace the ventricle, allowing the AV node to conduct retrograde. So what happens normally when the atrium doesn't capture, the impulse doesn't antigradally depolarize the AV node. On the other hand, the pacemaker thinks that the atrium is already depolarized and starts pacing the ventricle after a given AV delay. But remember, this patient had a sick sinus syndrome with an intact AV nodal conduction, which allows the impulse to go back in the retrograde direction. And that is what you see. Once you see a loss of atrial capture, that allows the suppose this atrium was captured, this would have never happened. So the treatment is very simple. You need to just increase. You're right. This is a pacemaker mediated tachycardia. And the treatment is very simple. You need to increase the output of the atrial port. And these things are quite common in clinical practice. And it's a very simple problem to fix. This boy who presented to us with DCM. Yes.
So how about increase in the PVAP, sir?
Go ahead with the question.
So how about increase in the PVAP?
Whenever you increase, that's right. You can increase the PVAP. Remember, why did you put a pacemaker in this patient? To give a atrial pacing. And if you fail to achieve that, that means your indication was not right. Now, you can increase the PVAP. That will also abolish this. But you have not fixed the underlying problem. I'll tell you what the other issue is. When you don't pace the atrium, this short, long atrial activation can trigger atrial fibrillation. So PVAP is a solution for a problem which can be fixed when you go to, PVAP is like giving paracetamol, whereas this is treating the underlying infection. Am I clear in what I'm saying? This
Yes.
ELT or the pacemaker mediated tachycardia happened because the patient lost a atrial capture. And that allowed the ventricular impulse to go back to if this atrium had been depolarized, the antigrade AV nodal impulse would have never allowed this to happen. So whenever you increase the PVAP, the 2-to-1 block rate is also a problem. But if you don't have any other solution, suppose this patient had everything else was normal, you can extend the PVAP. You're right. So this is a patient who presented, I have shown this ECG in the past with an X-ray. This is a patient with severe LV dysfunction on optimal medical therapy. This is the tachycardia. He was loaded on antiarrhythmic therapy, sacubitril, valsartan, everything, and then shocked once or twice. Didn't improve, and he was transferred on dobutamine, on inotropes. Worked up for transplant. Now, this patient, you can see the standard limb leads, this. So, why did you think this? Pardon? Go ahead. What is your question?
Is it a junctional tachycardia?
What tachycardia?
Junctional. Sir.
No, you can see the P wave, no? P wave. You can see in V1 a P wave, P wave, P wave. Holter shows, look at this, P wave, P wave, P wave. Any idea why this patient didn't respond to cardioversion? Why did the cardioversion fail? Patches were not adequate, improper technique. magnesium was low, or patient had excess sympathetic activity.
Automatic
Now,
tachycardia.
this is exactly, you got it right. Whenever you see a warm up at the beginning, there is a warming up phenomenon. Progressively, the PP shortens. That is typical of an automatic tachycardia. You and me know that automatic tachycardias do not respond to cardioversion. Any amount of shock, it won't respond. So it's either pharmacological or catheter-based therapy. Pharmacological therapy didn't work. This is a very eminently treatable cause of cardiomyopathy in young. This patient with severe heart failure on optimal medical therapy, diagnosis, right bundle branch block, bifascicular block, old MI with bifascicular block. So this patient actually came for a transplant, the last two patients, because his physicians had sent the picture elsewhere, and they were told that right bundle branch block will not respond to CRT.
This is bifascicular block, sir.
Yeah. So the difference is, this is called, whenever you have a right bundle on precordial leads and absence of S wave in lead 1, it indicates it's a masquerading bundle branch block. This was described several years ago. You should always look at the S wave in lead 1. If S wave is deep and wide and slurred, this patient will not respond to CRT. Whereas if this patient doesn't have an S wave, it means that the patient has bilateral disease. He has disease in the left bundle as well as the right bundle, and just that the right bundle delay is more than the left bundle. So this is, by convention, this is called masquerading bundle branch block. The clue is absence of S wave in lead 1, and that should give you a clue that this patient is likely to be a responder in spite of this. I think we'll stop with this, sir.
Lead one, sir.
This is V1, this is lead 1. Lead 1, you're able to see? This is lead 1 AVR, V1, V4. So 2, 3 AVF, small r, deep S with a little slurring. And here there is no S wave in 1 and AVL. In a typical right bundle, there should be a slurred S wave, which is not there. This is one subset of patients with right bundle morphology who will still benefit from CRT. Okay. Last case, 45-year-old male with dyspnea, 1 episode of syncope, family history of sudden death. Whenever you see T wave alternance, one T is inverted, the other one is flat, inverted, flat. It should make you suspect that this patient has got a malignant form of a long QT and he's prone to for sudden cardiac death at any time. These patients, even if you see as a drug-induced long QT, please do not discharge. Once you see a ST or T wave alternance, you should admit this patient till such time you sort out the issue. I think I'll stop with this. I don't want to extend and encroach on your lunch. And I'd like to thank you all for the patient listening. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to take. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You're audible.
Hello?
You're audible, sir.
Hello? Yes. Any questions? Hello?
Sir, one question from in chat box, sir. Previous 6NS syndrome you have shown, sir, pacemaker mediated tachycardia.
Yes.
So in that case, why ventricular pacing also done, sir?
It's inappropriate programming. It's inappropriate programming. You can put the MVP on this patient.
Yes. Maybe
you can put MVP
simple
on.
A, is it enough, sir?
So there are a couple of caveats. When you have an elderly person with sick sinus syndrome, about 2 to 3% will progress with AV block. So a couple of clues are, if you have a person with a wider QRS, or you stress the conduction system before you do anything. If you find that on atrial pacing, the one-to-one conduction is good, you need not put a dual chamber. But if it's an elderly person where you expect the degeneration to progress, we don't want to take a chance, we put it both. Younger person with this, we can afford to put a atrial lead alone, no problem. Does that answer your question?
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, one more doubt, sir, in the chat box. Sir, sometimes it is difficult to differentiate between R and S in VT. How to approach?
So you need to look at the 12 lead. At least one lead will show where the the QRS begins. So you take that morphology. Suppose it's all confusing, but lead 2, you can see a clear onset of a QRS. You use the beginning of that time and draw a vertical line to all the other leads. Am I clear in what I'm saying? So you look at one particular lead where the onset is seen and then draw the vertical line that will transect all the leads and tell you where the QRS is beginning. But there are certain situations, what you say is absolutely true, where you cannot make out whether it's the beginning or the end of the QRS. That is called sinusoidal VT or ventricular flutter. This is common in patients who are loaded with amiodarone or flecaroid, and then the conduction is so slow that, or in a very diseased heart, this can happen. The depolarization, by the time it reaches from one area, from the origin of the VT impulse to the end, the repolarization has started. It is truly, there is no gap between depolarization and repolarization. And this is a terminal disease, or a patient will have a very high DFT in this patient. Defibrillation threshold will be high.
Sir, one more question, sir.
Am I audible?
Will we differentiate RBB? Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, one more question, sir. How will we differentiate RBBB with LAHB from masquerading RBBB?
Okay. So if you have a patient with RBBB, LAFB, in the initial stages, if the left bundle is conducting briskly, that is the left posterior fascicle is conducting briskly, you will still not see, you will have a delayed S wave in lead 1 and AVL. Whereas if the left bundle is also very much delayed, then you find that the activation is not, it's an extreme northwest axis, which means the basal activation happens very late and unopposed, and on both sides, both right and left ventricle. So that is why they cancel out each other and you won't see a S wave. The S wave and precordial leads are important. 1 and AVL.
Sir, one last question, sir. How to say isoelectric delta waves?
So isoelectric delta is common in only particular lead. For example, I'll give you, if you have an accessory pathway that is going from atrium to ventricle, and if you have an electrode just along the course of the accessory pathway, then you will see a perfect onset of delta wave immediately. But if a particular lead is parallel, instead of parallel, it is perpendicular, then you will miss the initial vector of the delta. So some leads will be parallel, some will be perpendicular. So you need to look at the onset, where the onset of the delta is the earliest. And then if you put same way a vertical line, for example, V3 may show an onset which is a little earlier, and then you come back and see that lead 1 there is flat, because lead 1 is on the anterior intercostal space. If a person has a right free wall accessory pathway, it is not going to pick up the initial vector. So it will be isoelectric in V1, but it on a inferior lead, you will see a perpendicular delta. Very good delta. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
what is isoelectric in one lead confines to only one or two leads which are perpendicular. The other leads which are parallel will show a very good vector. Okay. Thank you. Then, if there's anything, we'll thank you again and have a
Thank you.
good sumptuous lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Dr. Pinjal Ramakrishna logged in? Hello?
Yes, I am here. Dr.
Yeah,
Fayaz
yeah.
is going to present first and then
Yeah.
I will present.
Sure. Pinjala, this
Yeah.
is a case wherein you are one of the examiners, and Dr. Krishnamuraju and Dr. K. Abraham are going to be the examiners. Okay?
Okay.
And